You're now listening to the Thousand Story Podcast, presented by Thousand Story. Welcome to the Thousand Story Podcast. We are your hosts, Naji
and Luis.
And we have a lot to talk about. So first of all, what is the Thousand Story Podcast? For actually, more than that, who are we? Why is this important? So my name is Naji. I'm a creative, and I call myself a creator and thinker, but most people would know me as a musician or singer-songwriter. And I'm also a producer for myself and other people, also a musician as a drummer. So that's my bit of context here. And Louise?
I am also an independent creative. I mainly do music and photography. I produce my own music. I sing. I'm an artist. I do a lot of things.
Yeah, we both do a lot of things. And we noticed that is a trend for the modern day, freelancer, creative freelancer, is that we all do a lot of things. And with that, there are so many stories and ideas that we wanted to share and talk about that, we thought it'd be a good idea just to make a podcast about it, because they're really podcasting for our generation is, there's more interest coming into it, but there isn't really... we're a new market that's entered into the podcast game. So we figured we'd fill the niche, talk about things that are relevant to 20-something freelance creatives.
There's a lot of information out there, but it's not collected into a spot where you can just learn about, what it is to be an independent creative, what it is to run your own business and things like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so, we wanted to share some of our experiences, share our friends' experiences, and, look at common trends or new things that are happening or being enacted that kind of affect us as independent creatives. And especially, both of us being musicians, things that affect us as musicians as well.
And I think it's good to note that this podcast is, by independent creatives for independent creatives. And even though we are musicians and that's where we come from and that's our main background, we do want to focus on other independent creatives, designers, videographers, t-shirt makers, you know what I mean? Like brand producers
absolutely
of the world. And even though we might lean a little heavy on the music side, we're going to try our best to kind of keep this for the rest of our audience.
Absolutely. So with that in mind, we wanted to talk today about how independent artists like ourselves, music artists in this case, in this conversation, make money. What are the avenues that we have to make that money?
So we brought in one of our friends, Chloe Heavey from Stem, to talk about her life, how she got into the music industry, and how Stem is helping independent artists, musicians make money and traverse the business side of music, which is highly important if you're to stay independent and to make your own money.
Absolutely. So before we get into that, we wanted to kind of touch on, what is an independent artist? Nowadays, that term is pretty vague because it's not just one person, It's, if you are one person, that's kind of, you're at a disadvantage already. Most independent artists have a team.
Yes.
So what goes...
Which is often overlooked.
Very overlooked.
Yeah. And most people really think, I love Frank Ocean or I love Donald Glover or all these artists, but they forget that it's not just them. They have an entire team around them.
Them and 50 people.
Right, exactly.
Or maybe not that many, but there's always way more above the water than there's below. You know what I mean? So there's always so much that goes into it that you don't see. And one of those things is that how many people are involved on your side, or how many people you have to have on your side to effectively make a release happen and make a career happen.
Yeah.
But even besides that, so, as what would you consider an independent artist then? If it's not just a singular person, I mean, it can be,
right?
But if it's not just a singular person or just bound to that, so what does that mean? So essentially, I like to define it as there's kind of like a difference between DIY artists and what did I say? It was DIY artists and DIO
artists.
Yeah. So like do it yourself and do it ourselves. So typically, unless it's one of those flukes where it's just, a Zach, how do you pronounce his last name? Villaire?
Zach Villaire?
I think
it's Villaire.
I think it's Villaire. But like Zach Villaire or Claro or Kuko or people or, those kinds of artists who are genuinely DIY. Like they just put stuff up. And, technically they do have a team. They have people that help produce the song. So Zach Villaire in this case, had, Weird Inside and, a few other people who were part of his collective in the past. Or, you have Claro who just straight up put, a song on the web and it just kind of blew up. Yeah. Those things happen. They're rare, but they happen. But typically the artists that you see that actually have like a solid following, like the Daniel Caesars, the Hers, the Chance the Rappers, the Frank Oceans, those guys have teams. They are definitely not doing it themselves. Yeah. Or themselves. Yeah. They're doing it ourselves. They're doing it with their entire squad. They have people on salary. I can't go into too many details about some things I know, but typically, those guys have dedicated plans and people to enact those plans. And most people don't even know that. And it's crazy.
Yeah, I never knew that until I started getting more into the business side of what it actually takes to be, a full-blown musician and artist, and that's your job, Yeah.
But there's that example, right? You have the DIYs, the DIOs. So then if you keep going and delving into, what makes an independent artist indie, it's really like the seceding of, or the secession from the major label or a label in general. And to an extent that's true, but there are still independent artists who sign with labels. It might be an indie label. It might be, it might be a one-off deal with a major label where they do a single instead, or, they don't have a definitive contract or time. They just, sign a project rather than themselves.
Right. Chance does quite a bit of that.
Right. Well, he'll sign with like a major company,
right,
or something like Apple, make a deal with that. And he's still technically indie, although that's a major company.
Right.
He's still an independent player. He's controlling the team and acting as his own business, as opposed to being controlled by a label or the label's interests.
Right.
So, a lot goes into the definition of independence. So there's a lot that you can do to be able to afford that lifestyle. It's not, there's not one size fits all. You have to be this type of independent artist to make it. So some things that people will do will be, some of them will take different kinds of deals. So, what kind of deals are there? So a record label deal typically involves, earlier, like back in like the 70s, so like when the major label.
And to preface, I guess this is the only way that you could before like basically the 90s and prior.
Before this was basically the only way to get a record out, was you signed with a major label, right? They took a percentage of, or an enormous percentage, basically your entire song. It made you transfer over your ownership of the masters being the sound recording, because there are a few different copyrights involved in a song, and we'll get into that a little bit more later. But basically, they owned the master side, the sound recording side, and then they gave you a percentage of that master, so they paid you back on your own song. But at that point, then they would also develop an artist. They, depending on how much they wanted to invest in that person.
Yeah.
But then on the other side, on the compositional side, you had, we still have publishing deals. And publishing deals have nothing to do with the label. Publishing deals are with publishing houses and publishing firms and agencies directly. So there are major publishing firms like Sony, ATV, EMI. I'm trying to think of any other ones. I can't really think of, but those are, two big ones where or Universal. These are companies that may have the label side or may have the sound recording side, but they also have their separate compositional publishing side. And that's an entirely different deal. That deals with the royalties and rights pertaining to the underlying composition of a song. So not the actual sound recording, but the notes, the arrangement, the
chords,
the lyrics.
the vocals, the lyrics.
Not the chords, actually, surprisingly.
Oh, yeah, that's right. We did have this conversation.
We did have this conversation. So, funnily enough, chords aren't actually copyrighted, which kind of makes sense if you think about it, because if we were to copyright chords, most of the songs wouldn't exist today.
But most songs in the 60s would not have been able to do it.
But everything else, so mainly the melody, the lyrics, and the arrangement of a song are copyrighted. And that copyright, if you don't have a publishing house to kind of admin those rights or to own them at all, you own them yourself. You by default, you own everything. You own the sound recording and the publishing rights or the compositional rights. But now, like I said, there's also that kind of deal where you can get an advance. And the funny thing about advances is that most people don't realize why it's called an advance, but I'll get to that in a second. So with both types of deals, major record label deals or publishing deals, you can get what we call an advance or some sort of other compensation up front. And then, that's how you know you made it. That was typically a sign of, wow, this guy's got a deal. I got a bunch of money up front. And, in the case of a major label, that was basically selling your soul away, because with an advance is called an advance because it's an advance on royalties. Now, what does that mean? Basically, long story short, it's a loan.
It's they're gambling on you to essentially pay that money back with the music that they are now going to own and that you made. So they invested in you or are going to invest in you upfront. Or not even upfront. They're going to invest in you and hope that they get royalties back on that. But to keep you to give you incentive to sign over this agreement or to sign this agreement in general, they give you an advance on those royalties. So a good faith gesture, so to speak, of being able to make the money back from this hit record that they're putting money into. But the thing that you don't realize, you should realize if you're signing it, but if you don't realize it, is that it is a loan. It is an advance. It is not free money. It is not something that you don't have to pay back. You have to make that money back for the label. They own the song. It's an advance on the royalties that you're supposed to make. So, and if the music doesn't pop off,
guess who has to pay the advance back?
You do.
So it behooves you, and it behooves artists nowadays to think about that. But that's a whole other conversation. So going back to being an independent artists can still make deals. So they can make indie deals or like one-off deals or like a single project type deal with independent labels who use similar terminology and similar kind of methods of putting out a release where they try to either own the master or exclusively license it, which is what I prefer in many cases. That's whenever I've dealt with a label, indie specifically, I've always made sure that it's either non-exclusive or if it's exclusive, it's a license and it's for a specific amount of time, because by default, most labels are going to put things in perpetuity. And in perpetuity means forever.
Never ending.
So
always owning.
It behooves independent artists to pay attention. But still, even if you do pay attention, say you know all these things and you're still taking this deal, either from an indie label or from a publishing deal, which is a kind of like a common thing for independent artists nowadays to do, to take a pub deal. And like I said, pub deals involve splitting or ownership. Sometimes, typically it's co-ownership of the underlying composition. So 50-50 in that regard. And then they might pay you in advance. They might just give you other perks in regards to, being a songwriter for other people. They might give you access to different songwriters in Rome or different artists that need songwriters. So there are different perks and pros and cons to a publishing deal than there would be, say, a major label record deal or just like a record deal because they both pertain to two different sides of music. So nowadays you're seeing a lot of artists take these pub deals to get an initial chunk up front where they feel like they're not giving away, because they technically aren't. It's that it's co-ownership in the sense that many of them now are doing like an exclusive license type thing where you're co-licensing or giving them exclusive rights over 50% of your composition.
Mhm.
And in exchange, then they give you access to industry, network connections. And like I said, sometimes it's in advance, sometimes it's studios, things like that. And that may work for you, for your specific type of situation, depending on what the deal is. And keeping that in mind, though, most people forget to realize that, all contracts are negotiable. You, as an independent artist, it's important to understand that you don't have to just sign what they give you right away. Always look at things, always observe, always ask,
Question.
and always negotiate.
Yeah.
See what you can get or what you need. Because if you don't have to take the advance up front, if you don't want that, then you could go and you have a little more leverage as far as what you can ask for elsewhere, because you're not taking money from them up front. You're both kind of invested into your career together. So that's, like I said, that's an option that a lot of indie artists are taking nowadays, where they have the pub deal. They don't have to worry about their masters. They own their masters. They own their composition, and they're making money, and that's successful for some. But many people in our field don't even know what that is or what that whole interaction is like. And that's due to there being sort of a miseducation on how to make money, when you're supposed to make it, what agencies you're supposed to collect them from, why they are agencies in the first place, why can't you just be handed the money directly, et cetera, et cetera. And all that misinformation is due to there not being a central location for all this information for indie artists or for artists in general.
Yeah.
And coupled with that, you have a lot of music industry heads that are trying to keep information, certain bits of information quiet, secret, or private, and you're not being included on certain meetings because technically the interest isn't in the interest of the artist. It's in the interest of making money off of the artist, or it's in the interest of the label that owns the artist's rights.
Right.
So there would be no reason for the artist to be part of meetings, et cetera, et cetera. So nowadays, being an independent artist means being aware. It means being, figuring out your game plan, figuring out what direction you need to go in and how you can accomplish that. Can you do that solo? Can you do that with a team? Or, what do you need to make those things happen? And then it's a matter of educating yourself on what you're going to be facing as an independent artist. And all of that, I think, encompasses today's independent artist.
Yes.
It's not just, there's no one type. It's a person who has several scenarios or several forms of experience in this field, dealing with both major labels and independent labels or no labels, and dealing with just person to person. So when dealing with person to person, say you're just foregoing the entire old hierarchy and setup for music and how people make music, which is off of royalties. And speaking of that, just to speak on that quickly before I go to the next point. Making royalties, how do you even earn that? What is that? What agencies, what goes into all that? How are you, why is it that being in music, you don't get paid monthly or weekly or anything like that? And it's because these agencies are here to collect royalties for you, sure, but they don't pay them out until one, you've hit a threshold, and two, they pay quarterly. So biannually. So you have a lot of times where you're not going to see money for a long time. And that's just on one side. That's just usually it depends on which, kind of distribution company you go through. But oftentimes you're not going to see the master side unless you have access to that distribution company's, kind of platform, or you make enough money on the master side. But on the compositional side, you don't see those royalties like for months at a time. So most of the time you could be making money, but you don't see it. You don't have any access to it until, the quarter one or two, or three, and that is problematic to me. So then it begs the question. So how do we improve that? How do we take the next step? How do we get artists paid? How do you make money as an independent artist if all your money's tied up in just bureaucracy?
Right.
And that is where people like STEM come in, or people like there's just any sort of independent distributor who is conscious of these problems and is making an effort to kind of collect all your royalties for you and collect all your dues and pay you out in a reasonable time and give you the stats that you need to actually further and better your money down the line. So STEM is a great example of that. And they are the company. They are basically a digital distribution company. They consider themselves a tech company, which they are. They completely are.
Yeah.
And for me, the funny thing is that I've never actually considered them a tech company because it just hasn't occurred to me because they've been so concerned about the music and so enveloped.
That's one of the cool things is I'm noticing more and more that people are like the whole overall zeitgeist that's kind of starting to like bubbling up, is that people are caring about the artists.
Yes.
More and more. And
Absolutely.
about how do we support the artists, making their way so that we can continue to get more content, essentially.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that is what STEM does. But coming back to that in a second here. Okay, so you have the royalty stuff down. You have your actual releases kind of down. Then you have the whole other domain of music, which is live performance, active income.
Yeah.
And independent artists have to go through that as well. If you're not with a label or you're not organizing it, you have to be your own booking agent. You have to be your own promoter. You have to be everything.
Gosh. There's so many things involved.
So many things.
Just being your own artist. Yeah. I mean, having to be the job of the booking agent, be the job of the music producer, the artist who's on stage, your own manager, essentially.
Absolutely.
Until you start building a team. Yeah.
Build a team. And at that point, then that's to say, okay, wow, there are a lot of jobs and there are a lot of things that go into being an independent artist. Mm-hmm. So how do you figure out what you want to prioritize? How do you figure out, how to make money from this thing if you have to do all the things? Mm. And there really is no one straight formula. Different things work. And there are general tips and, the bits of advice that we could give, but for the most part, there really is no clear-cut way to, definitively make money. People will make money in many different ways. We, however, have just happened to find some that work. And, it's not that, again, this is not knocking major labels or promoters or people who have, signed deals or anything to that extent. But it is a very different lifestyle and it's not for everybody. Not everybody can actually handle what it means to be an independent artist. Some people need certain things taken care of. Some people need to be able to not think about what deals they're signing, even though everybody should be thinking about what deals they're signing. But people have different priorities.
Yeah, some people want the income now, and want the stability, and that's okay.
That's
just choosing your own way. Yeah, it's totally fine.
Yeah. So, with all that said, being an independent artist is a music artist specifically, and it's so very all encompassing because there's so many different avenues to make money from this. And we haven't even touched on getting into merch or talking to manufacturers for that merch, or setting up pop-up shops or digital design or the branding. These are all different ways that you can kind of feed money back or make it kind of like a link in your money chain, so to speak. And with all that in mind, there are a lot of different topics that we could cover in today's podcast, but we are only going to be talking about the royalty side. And even though it's only one aspect, it's a very important aspect because most people don't have any idea of how to approach this side or how it's been approached or, how you even start making money from your music directly, like just the stuff that you've put out. So with that context in mind, our first guest will be a lovely friend of mine. Her name is Chloe Heavey, who actually is one of the artist development managers, if not the only artist development manager at STEM, and is here today to just chat, give us a little bit of her story, talk about some STEM things. So what is up, Chloe?
Hello, boys, or men, I should say.
I prefer the term boys.
Boys is cool with me.
Boy.
With an O-I, naturally.
Yeah. How you feeling, though?
I'm feeling fabulous. I just drank coffee. I'm in my pajamas, talking to my boys about important things. I can't complain.
I can't complain
either. That sounds awesome.
It's a nice, if we can make money from this eventually, which we will, when we make money
make money.
Yeah, let's manifest that.
Yeah. Put it into the future. Manifest
that.
Manifest
exactly. It will be a great living.
Yeah.
So one, I guess we got to figure out. So what's your story? I'll let Luis take it.
Yeah, because Chloe, I don't really know you very well. Actually, let me say this. I don't know you at all.
This is the
first time that you and I have met. Yeah, exactly. So, so what is it that you do really?
That I do? Okay, so I am the artist development manager at STEM, which is a title that is a bit confusing. Working at a tech company is interesting in the sense of we don't have a super hands-on role with artists. So I play more of a strategy role for the artists that we bring into the company. But maybe I should back up and explain what STEM is, maybe before I explain what I do.
I was about to ask. Yeah, we're good.
Okay. So
what is STEM?
STEM is a digital distribution and payments platform for independent artists, particularly those that have highly collaborative projects. Artists that use STEM, we enable you to add essentially revenue shareholders on both the sound recording and composition side of a piece of content, so that anyone that collaborated on your project is paid out directly per a revenue split month over month.
That sounds...
and that's the high level.
What's the low level?
The low level.
You don't have to go into it.
We have secret vaults where we keep Frank Ocean hidden. Yeah.
Is that where he's been? I was wondering why he wasn't making the festival appearances last year.
He's currently in our basement. But we feed him.
Are you feeding him?
Yeah, on Tuesdays.
That's
on Tuesdays, you know?
Only on Tuesdays.
Exactly.
So speaking of you kind of being a reference point for artists, I wanted to delve more now into your role in STEM.
Sure.
So we know you're an artist development manager, and we know how you kind of like got there and kind of worked your way up into that. So STEM as a whole for you, I feel like they have kind of a culture that's very nurturing. But what would you say that the STEM culture is? Like, what do you feel? Why do you work there? What's your role in that, and how does that affect you?
I say STEM culture is be good humans, do good shit.
That's cool.
Absolutely.
Very short and to the point.
Yeah.
We are a tech company, and the majority of the people that work at STEM are engineers. So very left brain, I would say.
Okay. Right.
That have a love for music and creativity. But the way they process the world is more pragmatic and to the point. So I say that's part of the culture is get shit done. Let's make it clear and simple. And then the be good people part is also very important. We don't want to be the clinical tech company. And that's why we have a product that serves musicians. And there's that human kind of gushy bit of being a part of STEM is we love music and we love making a product that helps people and helps move creativity forward and bolsters collaboration. So I love STEM, and I stayed at STEM because it's this beautiful juxtaposition of tech and business with the arts. And both those sides exist within me. And it was the first place that I felt like I didn't have to sacrifice any of my interests or myself when going to work.
I do have a question. So how did you get into, like, you weren't always working at STEM?
No.
Obviously.
Mm-mm.
What were you doing right before that? I guess, like, you're out of college,
So I was doing A&R at A&R internships at different labels, publishing companies and management companies. I was actually managing a rapper, and he got offered a pub deal. I saw the deal, and it was sort of the nail in the coffin of not wanting to work for the industry.
Yeah.
Just because it was a death sentence. And I was like, ugh, I can't be a part of this. Like, I can't be an A&R that signs people to deals like this. So I was like, I'm going to do it on my own. I started working with another artist. I wanted to put out music for him, and I needed a distributor. Found STEM. Milana was like, love this idea. At the time, there was only 15 people working at STEM. She was like, you can just come run your little business or like side hustle out of our office and do the things that we don't want to do in exchange.
Well, shout out to Milana for that one. For people who don't know, Milana is the co-founder and CEO, I believe, of STEM. And she's just a homie, especially for that. I already knew she was the homie, but that's what's up, Milana.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's super cool.
She really took me under her wing, as she's done for many people. So I did that and was kind of just sitting in the STEM space, and eventually that changed into me contracting for them and working for them on the support side and really doing any kind of odd job that they needed me to do. A lot of it was A&R based as well. Because when STEM started, it was very exclusive. So we only allowed very select people onto the platform. So part of what my job was to essentially find artists that were worth approaching at the beginning of STEM.
Makes sense.
And I loved doing that. And then I graduated college. They offered me a position to work as Milana's assistant. And I did that actually right after college. So I had been working for STEM as an intern for 6 months. Moved into the assistant role. I did that for 7 months. And then was. And
I believe I met you when you were you were an intern at that point, right?
Yeah.
Wait.
I think I was an intern when you met me.
Okay.
The first time.
So was it at that point when you were right before you were her assistant then?
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
Exactly. And then in December of last year now, I was promoted to be the artist development manager.
Wow, that's awesome.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's how she got to that point.
And now, exactly. But I guess what artist development looks like at STEM, or what that role is half of it is A&R, still. And it's constantly discovering new artists that are early bets. So people that aren't clear, not winners, I don't want to say winners, but obvious choices for people that we'd want to sign up, but artists that are great, have a great presence, and the music is there. It's finding them and essentially routing them to a salesperson. Additionally, it's like keeping track of every independent artist that could potentially sign to a label and routing those people to our salespeople as well, so they can begin the conversation and hopefully introduce the STEM model and promote independence and at least give those artists the option to not sign.
Right.
Got it.
That's half the job, as well as finding artists that are already within the platform that maybe are underlooked or haven't received the amount of attention that I believe that they merit, and trying to find ways that STEM can further bolster their career or at least play a strategic arm. So inviting them to the office and discussing their rollout strategy and giving them tips on what the DSPs are looking for, or even just connecting those artists with people that we know and love that could help that artist grow. That's the development side of my job.
Got it.
That is super cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah, that is a lot.
I'd say the rest of the job is operational. So it's the underbelly of our artist relations team and deciding what does it look like to start a conversation with an artist? What is your initial email? What's the process of bringing them into the office and selling? How do we tier out our product? A lot of operational processes and deciding how the artist relations team interacts with the other organizations within STEM. So product or the engineers, coming up with processes to essentially make the internal structure work very well. That's the bulk of my job, I would say, actually.
Damn. Well, you are very multifaceted.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, I think we were talking about this a little bit earlier, but I am a relatively new artist, right? And I kind of wanted to know, because I use STEM.
Yay.
And I guess I kind of wanted to yay. But we kind of slightly discussed, publishing deals and why they may not be so great for artists.
Or why they might be great.
Or where they might be great.
The pros and cons.
Right, the pros and cons. I myself would like to remain an independent artist because I find more pros in that. But why should I choose STEM over like TuneCore or CD Baby or any other form of releasing music?
Got it. So I think I will start off by saying that there's no one spiel for every artist. It very much so depends on what your goals are as an artist, as well as kind of how you run your business. I would say if you're comparing us to a TuneCore or a DistroKid or a CD Baby, these services that are very hands-off in terms of how the companies interact with you, our service is superior because of the user interface and how simple it is to use, as well as the fact that there's no upfront fee when you sign up to use Stem, nor is there a fee if your shareholders sign up to use Stem. Additionally, DistroKid, I believe, is the only service at that level that enables you to pay out multiple like revenue shareholders on the master and composition. But with DistroKid specifically, anytime you add a shareholder, if they don't already have a DistroKid account, they have to pay the $25 when they're added as a shareholder. So you're charging your shareholders to get paid.
Possibly, if the song pops off.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's not great. I'd say additionally, at this level, we have a very robust support team that we're proud of. And support is a big thing for us because we understand that at any point in your career, you want to feel like a priority at a company.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And the biggest feedback that we got from artists at different levels is they want to be able to talk to a human. And we can't provide that at scale by talking to someone on the phone each time. But we have created a system where we have essentially live support, which is an in-app chat function. And it's on a first responder basis. So there's a team of individuals that you're not assigned a support person, but these 5 people, they look at their inbox and it's kind of like whoever gets there first will tackle the conversation with you so that you feel like you're being responded to as quickly as possible.
That is one of the things that really surprised me as a new artist in general, because I'm just like, I'm releasing my first track or whatever. And I have a lot of questions, obviously, because it's my first foray into that world, into using Stem and learning how to make money essentially
from your
my music. Yeah. And that was one of the things that kind of wowed me about Stem, was just the fact that I had somebody actually caring about what I was asking about and not bothered by me at all. Because every time I'm just like, thank you so much. Like, I really appreciate you. I'm sorry for asking so many questions. But they're so cool with it, which I really love that. But yeah, so as a new artist, I know that there's a lot of specific things that you need to do to kind of build a successful music career. And there's a lot of, it's multifaceted. There's a lot of things that go into for your product and everything. But what are some of the mistakes that you have seen new artists make when, I guess, traversing the music business side?
I think team building is the biggest mistake that's made. Not the fact that they're building a team, but building a team in the wrong way. I've seen many artists either be very difficult to work with and go through managers very quickly, like the turnover is high. And that comes from expectations, and I think not talking about expectations with your potential manager from the jump. I've also seen several artists build a team of just friends and have the merit of that team be the friendship, which it's great, great to work with your friends, but they have to also be competent and capable.
Right.
Yeah.
And
like, I got you, bro. We're bros. I'm gonna get you this deal, bro. Like, it's solid. Oh, I didn't get it this time, but next time you're my bro.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've seen that.
So I think that's
a lot.
First mistake that's made is not taking the time to be thoughtful and conscientious about who you're bringing on board, or thinking that you can do it all by yourself and that the world will listen and care. It's a really hard job to be an artist that people know about. It's difficult and it requires infrastructure.
Yeah.
So
speaking of that infrastructure, I don't mean to interrupt you. I'll let you finish. But is that kind of one of the things that's, I know it's essential to actually, creating the team and creating the artists and making that artist be successful. But, as far as things go, for things needed to actually make an artist successful, Infrastructure is one thing, but are there any other things that you would say that the indie artists or the budgeting, or what's the word I'm thinking of? The up and coming indie artist needs to kind of thrive. Like what would you
the budding
indie artist? Yes. What would you say like that that kind of indie artist needs the most just out of the gate, just to start developing for themselves and for their team?
Like sans income without money being a factor.
Right. If you just money aside, their goal would be to eventually start making that income. So what are things that they can do to kind of best, develop their whole business, which is, themselves as an artist. But prior to that, like what's a good way to kind of develop a business plan for themselves? What are some elements needed for that so they can, long term have a, kind of foreseeable career in music or as that artist?
Totally. I think the first thing is extensively building the personal brand and world around who the artist is. Because I think sometimes artists fail to realize how important that is within a digital age. And the fact that artists that get signed don't get signed because of great content. Artists that get signed are signed because great content plus great star power. And the star power is questionably more important.
I was going to ask you that. So why is it that the star power, I guess in the major realm, I get it. If you're marketable, you're a cash cow essentially to any sort of person who wants to invest in you or any sort of business that wants to invest in you. But do you think that it's a good thing or a bad thing that it's kind of at that point where, star power is more important than the actual content?
I don't think it's hard to say if it's more important. It's more of it. You have to have both.
Right.
They have to coincide with one another. And it's not in the sense of, even if you're an indie artist, the brand still has to be strong for the cohort of individuals that you're making music for. For example, I'm trying to think of a good example of this. Do you guys know who Gus Dapperton is?
No. Oh, I know that name. That's so familiar. Oh my God. I don't know.
Definitely don't.
Okay. He's an indie artist, and the music that he makes will never be on the radio, in my opinion. It's not radio music.
Wait. Hold on. I know exactly who this is now. I know who this is.
Okay.
Yes.
But he's built a brand that's highly marketable and appeals to the niche of individuals that will like his music and play it and stream it as if it's a radio song.
I see this. And how would you say he's gone about that? Is that, like his imagery, his lifestyle, like how is he? Yeah, I guess I guess that's my question, Like how would you say he's kind of tapped into that whole thing?
I believe that it's taking the time to again, build the brand. And the first question that I ask of artists when I meet them and they tell me that they want to be an artist is, do you want to live in your artistry or do you want it to be separate from who you are? And I think that's a big question to ask because you have certain artists like, let's say Lady Gaga, that have these huge personas.
Right.
And sometimes like that can get tiring, I think. But I think it's also very appealing because it's so avant-garde and unlike the norm. But you have to commit to that. And if that's what you're committing to, you better look like Lady Gaga every day. And you can't go to CBS really not looking like Lady Gaga. It's those types of conscious decisions from the jump and being very intentional when you go out into the world, how you speak about yourself. Even the small things of like, what type of content are you posting on your Instagram? What is your Instagram caption? I think the best brands don't look like they're that intentional, but the person has put a lot of upfront thought before they even post anything on the internet or before they walk out the door.
Interesting.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. I mean, that's specifically for in my case, one of the reasons why I just kind of like wiped my entire Instagram feed was because I personally don't really care to maintain a social media presence, so to speak, like, or for the sake of just maintaining it. Like if I'm on there because I want to be, or I want to, look at funny memes or whatever the case may be. But, I realize that there's value in having the audience. So for me, Instagram, since I didn't use it all that often, or, I kind of used it randomly, it kind of made my own branding look sort of messy, which, it was kind of conflicting with when I would, put music out, and I'm like, deep thought, conscious effort, look deeper into the music. And then you see it like a picture of a baby dancing on a banana. It was just like, okay, what are you going for, bro? So, it is incredibly important to even look at those little things. I've had to do so in my own case and really consciously, make decisions to put forth an image that is consistent with everything, or kind of have consistent purposes. So, for, in my case, Twitter is really just my a stream of thought, stream of consciousness thought, and it could be funny, it could be serious, but that's kind of what people expect from me. And on Instagram, now I've changed the branding to where I don't post things on my timeline unless it's incredibly important, or like a new release, or if it's a very important person to me, because I want people to pay attention to that specifically. There's only 6 posts or 8 posts now on there, and each one has a very specific purpose. So it's definitely good advice for those listening to really look at what you're posting, why you're posting it, how it matches with your brand, and seeing, what your goals are and what you intend to do with your career on each platform, or no platforms if you don't want to go that route. Like, Childish Gambino, for example, where his whole imagery now, it shifted from being the internet rapper to now it's this. What would you call Childish Gambino now?
See, the thing with Childish Gambino is I think it's kind of seeped into Donald Glover. Right. That Childish Gambino is just one facet of what he does, because now he's just a renaissance. Because everybody knows who he is. It's not like he's like separate Childish Gambino.
Right, but you don't know him as a rapper now. You just know him as this. What kind of artist would you consider him to be now? As opposed to his last album, because you can't really describe that
70s throwback with hip hop flair.
Yeah, right. And then you take into account his personality behind that, and it's like, he doesn't follow anybody on any socials, and he's always talking about Python and coding and the importance of education in that realm. Yes. And there's kind of like this. It's almost a persona, but like you said, it's kind of bleeding back just into Donald Glover, where he's creatively just shifted the focus back from rap in a specific genre to kind of this movement or this lifestyle of just be who you are, be weird, be, forward thinking, which is really cool. He's just put thought into that.
Something that's important to note with him too is it was building blocks to be able to be a Renaissance man and to have that not be a confusing persona. Like, it's the same with Kanye. Is Kanye or 50, like, they're doing a bunch of stuff, and he does fashion, he does music, he, like, he's on TV. Yeah. He's only able to do that because he did a great job of building a world in the beginning and building that fan base and slowly expanding that world to include other people and other fan bases. So I find that it's interesting when I meet artists that have expectations to be so multifaceted before they've done the work of really building one great world and having that world populated with fans. Does that? I know I'm talking in metaphors here, but I think
no, that makes complete sense.
That makes sense.
So I guess expectations of growth and understanding that growth has to happen to become the megastar and tackle one world at a time, I would say, in terms of building your career.
Interesting. And it's funny that you say tackle one world at a time, doing one thing at a time. We're going to be talking about later in the series about wearing, how we as independent artists kind of wear all the hats and do all the things and try and venture out and we're producers, we're graphic designers, we're all jacks of all trades and masters of none. But it's important to then go back and kind of select the few that you really should focus on or want to focus on, and just dig into those and commit to those. So it's kind of like embodying that aspect of just focusing and digging in on one thing and building that thing up. Then you can go to the next thing. It's important. It's just interesting to see how it even works on that level.
I was kind of lost in thought for a second because I'm kind of
blew your mind.
Yeah, because I'm thinking about like branding as a whole, and how you were saying that sometimes that can be a lot more important than, you know, necessarily like the content. Like I'm thinking of like the Lil Yachty's of the world.
Right.
You know what I mean? The people who I don't necessarily enjoy listening to Lil Yachty's music, but he's just got this vibe
Right.
that I don't know what it is about it. I don't know what it is, but it's like, it's just interesting to watch. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I guess some of the last questions for you then, Chloe, would be where do you think or where do you want to see the music industry, you know, 10 years from now? Do you still even want to be a part of it at that point? Or do you like, what's your goal? Where do you see things?
Where do I see the music industry? I see all of the streaming services being one. I don't see streaming going away, but I think it'll be a conglomerate. I don't know if streaming will be still separate from our phone bills or if it'll be tied into how we pay for our devices or not.
Interesting.
So I think streaming will exist, but I just am unsure of exactly what the payment structure will be going forward.
Right.
I think it'll continue to become more independent in the sense of I think management companies will begin to be more impressive and look like labels. So I think we'll see a crumbling, or not crumbling, but I don't think major labels will be the end all be all eventually. I think management companies will sort of take their place and that the music industry will be more comfortable with niche markets and saturating niche markets as opposed to promulgating like really, really popular music and pushing that hardcore all the time and that being the gold standard. Yes. I think expectations will go down slightly, but then happiness will increase by being okay with a little bit more of a segmented market. Because I think you can see that in genres now, everything is crossover and it's sort of hard to almost define genres anymore, but pop doesn't even really sound pop as I view the definition of pop to be.
Right.
So
it's definitely changed. You've had so many like influences come into the music at this point that it's hard to say, oh, this is definitively pop. I think even what's his name, Charlie Puth?
Yeah.
Puth? How do you say his last name?
Puth. I don't know.
Puth. P guy, Charlie P. I'm calling Charlie P. That's my homie Charlie P. So Charlie P was even talking about the recent song he did with Kehlani, where you know it was a pop record, but he didn't use any sort of pop structure or chords or anything like that. And we're gonna see a lot more of that in the mainstream.
Yeah,
you know,
I think something that I see happening is we're starting to listen to genres less. Like, you know, if before it used to be like, oh, what kind of music are you into? And people would be like, oh, I'm into rock and hip hop and all this stuff, you know, and we kind of still say that now, but I feel like more so we're listening to artists because of who they are. Right. And that, you know, I listen to like King Cruel for a specific reason, you know, or I listen to Yellow Days or whatever, you know, all these artists because they're themselves and I'm not going to get that sort of content anywhere else.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. So, Chloe, if you were an artist, what kind of music would you make?
Oh, that's such a good question. If I was an artist, oh my goodness. I want to say I would want to be a big character and someone definitely that chose the lot. I would start with hip hop, but it would be very left of center hip hop. So maybe like a Doja Cat type character. I definitely wouldn't be a popular artist.
Doja Cat. Wait, why do I know that name? Obviously, that sound it's familiar for a reason. Wait, Doja Cat. Why does that sound?
She does like So High, I'm pretty sure, right? Am I wrong?
Look her up on Instagram and you'll get it.
Right, Doja Cat. Yeah.
I think I would be.
I feel you.
I would be
so
a character.
Like
Colors.
Very extravagant character. Yeah.
Yes. Big fan of Kali Uchis.
Yes.
Women that have built, I would have built a world that is very much their own and is a fantasy, but they believe it so hardcore and the content is so good that it feels real.
Got it.
That's awesome.
Dope. So what do you think, I guess, knowing some of your influences now, so that'd be kind of like a, I want to say, it'd be kind of the best of both worlds, a little bit of hip hop, a little bit. And I think that'd be really interesting coming from, someone like yourself, where, like you said, just this white girl from Atlanta, Georgia, doing the whole Doja Cat thing, but then is also a hip hop artist, but also like jazz, maybe, I don't know, but like, it'd just be really, really interesting. We don't see a lot of that, so I would love to see myself in 10 years from now, or even now, someone like an artist like that. And I think we are going to see a lot more of that. The Doja Cats and the weird, I think the era of names being symbols instead, like the artists formerly known as such a, it might be more of a thing. I don't know. Millennials are getting kind of weird. We're kind of weird people.
We're very weird. Yeah.
Well, I think
it's going to be.
It depends where our society goes too. Like.
So where would you say our society is going? Or where do you see, like, what do you expect? I guess there aren't any expectations, but where do you estimate that it would go?
Controversial statement. Currently, I think we're in a very weird place. I think it was good in a backwards way that Donald Trump was elected. I think it really highlighted.
We've had this conversation. I completely agree.
We both agree. Yeah.
Okay, so we're on the same page there, and I think it's interesting to see how his marketing campaign for himself worked. To me, it's very analogous to reality TV and appealing to this feeling of wanting to be distracted.
That's interesting that you mentioned that, because I feel like most of the things that he says is meant to distract people from something that's actually happening, or like something that he's actually doing or working on, and that has always been interesting to me, because then, I don't know, when he says something, I feel like I don't want to get political or anything like that, but I am. But, he'll say something that's just absolutely ridiculous, that is just like wouldn't ever possibly take place, like, oh, we're going to give all teachers guns.
You're like,
which is just, that's never going to happen. That's just never, ever going to happen. But everyone just goes off and talks about it as if it's going to happen. And then he's doing something else. He's like, meet me in the middle somewhere. You know what I mean?
But think about it. Like, the majority of people that are working go 9 to 5. They aren't paid that much money. They don't have time really for themselves. Maybe they have a family. You get home from work, you're cooking from your family or doing whatever you have to do before you just go to bed. And you turn on the TV. And I think the last thing that people want to do, and as sad as this is educate themselves or to think after working for that long. It's the majority of people aren't living like the 1% life. Nor have they been given the tools to easily educate themselves and how to do that so that it's not such an uphill battle. So I think Donald Trump and like that campaign has played into how easy it is to turn him on and not think and be sensational and enjoy. And I think that's why, especially in rap right now, you see the same trend in terms of what people are gravitating towards with this like wave of like Gucci Gang, Gucci Gang, Gucci Gang, Lil Yachty, like all of these artists that I don't want to say that they don't mean much, but it's really lighthearted and distracting and sensational. And
it's not timeless music. We won't listen to them after they're done. Like
it's got a very specific vibe, which is to not think and turn up and just tune out everything and have a good time. You know. Which
so
makes sense.
As we wake up, I think, to the issues within our own society, and I'm talking from an ethnocentric perspective. This is from an American perspective. I believe that as we become more conscious in terms of our society, and that becomes cool to be conscious, younger kids will again be attracted to more conscious material. So I think that's the next wave of what type of genre and what type of content and what type of characters are going to be really big and important. Maybe not in the next 2 years, but like the next wave of what's making a lot of money, I think will again be kind of like this phase of artists that are big activists, artists that have something to say, and lyricism that is important, which we're starting to see. Which means
it's going to be my era. I'm all right with that.
That makes me happy to hear that. That really makes me happy. Yeah. So lastly, I guess I do want to ask you this. What are some of your favorite artists that you're listening to right now that I guess we might not know about, you know?
Totally. Okay. My favorite artist right now is a duo out of Atlanta called Danger Incorporated.
Okay.
Daintree Incorporated.
It's
Never
like-
heard of them.
Writing it down.
It's kind of alternative rap.
Okay.
They're dope. Who else do I love? I love an artist called Evan Gia, and she's actually a STEM user.
Hey.
Shout out to STEM. There's an artist called Amalou. She's a R&B singer from the UK that I'm really into. And then this...
Are these...
What?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's
Are these some artists that you've like talked to and have reached out to, or?
Yes. Well, I've hiked with Amma, so that's kind of cool.
That's super cool.
Wow.
We got lost. I told her I was taking her to a great Malibu hike, and it ended up being a very sketchy hike where we encountered many hobos along the way.
Oh my
God.
Yeah,
that is a story I wish to hear in person.
Yeah, we haven't hung out again since then, but it happens.
Wait, were you trying to go to like the Santa Monica Mountains?
I don't know what I was trying to do. I was like, okay, there's this really cool artist. She's in LA for her first time. I want to bring her to like a great Malibu Topanga Canyon situation hike. And I had a pin.
Definitely a situation.
My friend had given me a pin and like a relative description of like where this awesome hike was. Your girl got lost, and we'd been driving for a long time. So we're just like, all right, fuck it. We're just going to start hiking. And it was pretty underwhelming. And I felt super weird about it the entire time we were hiking, but like was smiling. And I was like, this is great, right? Are we having fun yet? Like,
are we having fun
This
yet?
is fun. Have fun. Please be having fun.
so I've met her. I haven't met the rest. I actually curate a playlist called Don't Sleep. And
Yes.
Oh, cool.
Yes, you do for STEM. And I love it.
yes, this week is all ladies. But if you follow that, you'll hear what I listen to on a weekly basis. And it's all like my favorite not even guilty pleasures, but like the people that I'm obsessed with that are underrated currently, or maybe unsigned, or even if they're signed, but I don't think have gotten the love yet that they deserve.
Yeah. I'm about to check this playlist out.
Yeah, I already have it. I'll send you the link for it. So wait, is Amber on that list? Because I actually turned Louise on and a few other people to Amber, and I found out that Amber I actually have a few mutual friends with. So I'm going to try and get in touch with her when I'm in New York. But we shall see, because Amber's dope. Just so you know, Amber Lucid. That's AMBAR Lucid, like lucid dreaming. She is incredible. I love her sound.
Yes.
And Chloe turned me on to her. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Well, that's it for this episode. If you have any burning questions or topics you want us to talk about, hit us up on the site at thousandstory.co/contact, or follow us on Twitter and Instagram at thousandstory_. That is an actual underscore, not the word underscore. And if you want to know about our lives outside of the podcast, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram as well. My handle is Mr. Naji Boy. That's MRNAJIBOY.
And I go by at L Pontillo on Instagram. That's LPONTILLO. And at Luis Pontillo. That is LUISPONTILLO on Twitter. You can find that information on the website at thousandstory.co/podcast. And Chloe, where can we find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Clo Money, Clo Problems. And that's CLO Money, CLO Problems with no spaces.
And don't forget to check out Chloe's curated STEM playlist, along with all the rest of the others that they have on Spotify.
Fabulous.
Yeah. And so this is a two-parter. So this is part one. Part two will be coming up soon. And we'll be having more fun times with Chloe. See you soon.
Okay, thanks, guys.